It's time to take command with former NFL tight end Logan Paulsen and former Commanders beat reporter Craig Hoffman.
What's happening? Welcome in to Take Command Podcast. Craig Hoffman, Logan Paulsen with you, Logan. It's training camp day. It starts today.
How crazy is that, man? It feels like it was a long time coming, but here it is, and we're super excited for it.
Very, very excited. So on Monday, we previewed the entire offense, as well as some bigger overall thoughts, which meant that defense got saved for today. So let's dive in. Off we go. 3 questions each. Position group. What do you look for in camp at this group? Position battles to watch and confidence levels in your D-line, linebackers, DBs. We'll show some love to the specialists at the end as well. Can't forget Tress Way. Tress will never forget you. Let's get rolling. Let's start off with the defensive line. And what do we look for? Obviously, you have the tackles, you have the edges. What are we looking for here?
Obviously, this is one of those positions that's more based on like athletic traits. So obviously, when you're watching one-on-ones, do they have athletic pass rush juice? And in team, like, are they physical at the line of scrimmage? Can they get hands on guys? Can they shed blocks? Do they? And again, this is another one kind of like receiver, where are they making plays? And I think that can't be overstated. The value of getting a group of guys or getting an individual specifically that's going to make plays. And so the physicality, the raw tools, the athleticism to rush the passer, and the physicality to stop the run are all things that you kind of circle and say, this is super important to the position.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, one-on-ones are always really fun to watch here. O-line, D-line, like who's got the pass rush juice. I won't say we've seen guys make teams out of that, but like you can really tell, oh, this guy's got a different level of juice. We need to watch him a little bit more in the team settings. And if they can replicate that in 11 on 11, then that guy's probably going to wind up on the team, especially on a team that doesn't have a lot of pass rush juice on the outside coming in, at least doesn't appear to have a lot of pass rush juice on the outside coming in. I think there's a lot to watch on the interior, which gets us to our position battles as well. We know John and Duran are in. I think Johnny Newton's status is really fascinating and could have majorly affect this team.
Yeah.
Newton's going to start camp on NFI. He would start on PUP, but the injury he had was sustained in college. So technically he's on NFI. And if he's not ready for the season, in some ways it makes it easier because you're looking at, okay, how many interior guys are they going to keep? Big Phil, John Ridgway, like there's some other guys that have been around in the past that are probably going to wind up on the outside in. But even between Ridgway and Big Phil, like, is there enough for everybody on the roster depending on how many edge guys you want to keep? So this becomes really interesting really fast. And one way that you could, quote unquote, solve that problem, at least temporarily, is if Newton's not ready for the season. But that then presents the problem that Newton's not ready for the season.
Right. Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, this group is, again, one of those ones kind of like receiver where we don't really know exactly what they're looking for. And do they even have that type of player on the roster? Because I think when you look at Dallas and what they did in Dallas, they just accumulated all these like really good pass rushers. And obviously Doris Armstrong's here from Dallas. He's one of those guys that's surefire to make the team. Dante Fowler feels very similar to that. But then you say, like, is it KJ Henry and Andre Jones? Are they both making the team? Because that would get you to 5 edge rushers with Cleveland Farrell. And then that gets to your point. Like, if you're keeping 5 edge rushers and then you got to keep 4 or 5 interior guys like John Ridgway versus Big Phil, Benny Potuai versus Norrell Pollard, the kid from Virginia, the UDFA, who showed all that tremendous pass rush promise. I mean, analytically, he was one of the best pass rushers in college football. So to me, it's like totally up in the air. And then if you take Drazan out, it makes it a little bit cleaner because you just need bodies. But if Drazan's healthy for the start of the season, which is up in the air at the moment, I'm not going to comment on the injury status or anything like that, but it does make that dynamic really really interesting. And again, like, what are they going to value? Are they going to value kind of a big run stopping player? Obviously Dan drafted Ridgway in Dallas, and Ridgway has been very excited about Dan being here and feels like he fits in the system well. So it's kind of like, one of those ones where there's so many questions, there's so many layers to this. And can't wait to see what it looks like.
Yeah, as you mentioned, one affects the other, and that also gets to the outside stuff. So I think Fowler, Furl, and Armstrong are locks. I think Henry's probably a lock, but based off of both draft position last year and merit, like I think KJ Henry's probably clearly the 4th best guy here. But You draft Javonte Jean-Baptiste. They did choose to bring back FA, who's got inside-outside position flex.
Though, right now?
I do think he's coming off an injury. So maybe that they're able to bring him in the middle of the year if someone else gets hurt. But like, he's a really interesting guy.
Sure.
That they chose to bring back, and we know he can play 3 tech as well as play outside. Jones has all this juice, but like, does he know how to use it?
Right.
And can he use it at the NFL level? So like, and then again, Jean-Baptiste is a draft pick.
Right.
So
he's a 7th round pick. I mean, he's a guy that feels like you could probably sneak to practice squad, and he's also kind of navigating an injury from what I understand. So, I think, what is it? When do they report? Tomorrow? They report on Tuesday. So like, I think that for this group specifically, that injury, injury designation is going to be super important. Like, who's where, what's going on, because it might be really complicated, like you're saying, or maybe FA and Jean-Baptiste are on PUP, and then you're like, okay, well then these are the guys that are going to make the team. Yeah. So,
all right, linebacker. Confidence level in this group.
I think it's going to be a very solid group. I think they're going to, in terms of like, breaking the NFL sack record, I don't think they're going to do that, but I think they're going to be really solid. I think, we gave the receivers a 7, and I think I kind of feel the same way about this group. I think John and Duran are going to play better. I think the edge guys are going to do what they're supposed to do. I think the defensive scheme is going to elevate them. So I think because of scheme, because of kind of who the players have shown themselves to be in terms of just super consistent, I feel pretty good about it.
Yeah, I feel pretty good. I in some ways it is exactly like receiver, where I feel really good about the floor and not great about the ceiling.
Right.
Where I'm like, oh man, but they just don't have that like horse off the edge, which we'll talk about in a second when we get to linebacker. But yeah, 7 feels right. Okay, linebacker. Speaking of, you have Wagner, you have Luvu, and those guys are, what do you look for in camp at this group? I want to see those guys play football. But there's a lot more to it. Linebacker, what are you looking for specifically?
So yeah, like, are they fitting gaps correctly? Are they in their spots in coverage? How's their communication? That's the middle. That's the backbone of the defense. Like, they got to talk to everybody, make sure everybody's on the same page. I think obviously Bobby Wagner is, maybe the best in the NFL at that. So I expect that to go really well. And then usage, I think we're going to talk about there in a second, but like, how are they going to use Frankie Luvu? And if they're going to use him as an edge rusher, which maybe changes the numbers a little bit for the defensive end group. How do they use Jordan McGee or Jamin Davis, or does Anthony Pittman edge somebody out? Like, those are guys that I think are in terms of how they use players. And then I think that also kind of bleeds into the nickelback scenario in terms of like, do they have a lot of confidence in Dominique Hampton? Does he take one of these linebacker spots? So usage for this group is maybe the most important, because I think it speaks to kind of an identity with regards to the defense. And obviously, I think the two guys, Luvu and Warner, or Wagner, are in. But after that, you're kind of like, what does Joe Witt Jr. want to do with this group in terms of, are we using a nickel? Are we using a dime? Are we using Luvu in pass rushing situations? Who's the next rotational piece for that? So I think in addition to like the technical elements, like, usage is extremely important for this group.
Yeah. If you had to pick, bonus question, which guy plays the most snaps this year? I'll phrase it that way.
Luvu, I think.
You think Luvu over Wagner? Like, if the 100% snap guy is Luvu?
I think so. I think because Luvu, while maybe not being the most dynamic coverage player, I think he adds value as a pass rusher. And so I think they're going to find a pass rusher and a blitzer. So I think they're going to find ways to keep him on the field. And I think when you look at Wagner at this point in his career, I think he's still a very good player, but I want to add better coverage players. So I think when you look at Dallas, like, they'd leave one linebacker on the field, which I guess that could be Wagner, but I think Wagner and Luvu maybe both together in some nickel rush packages because of Luvu's ability to rush the passer. But then I think that's where the Dominique Hampton, Mike Sanderstill, Quan Martin questions start to kind of matriculate there, in terms of, if you feel really good about those guys, maybe they can actually play linebacker for you in certain pass rushing situations. So
interesting. All right, so position battle to watch. I mean, this one feels kind of clean.
For me, it's Jamin Davis. It's Jamin Davis.
Yeah, well, Jamin Davis is like, it's almost Jamin versus himself. If we look at Luvu, Wagner, I think Pittman, like, veteran, they brought him in for a reason. Jordan McGee.
He's looked good. He's made plays in OTAs and minicamp.
Jordan McGee, rookie, he's obviously making it. So there's 4, and that could be it.
Yeah.
And then you get to Jamin.
Yeah.
So position battle, Jamin versus himself.
Yeah, and I think this is going to be really interesting, and maybe one of like the most interesting stories of camp, and maybe could possibly reflect kind of how the new group is viewing certain positions. Like, they're trying him out at edge rusher. In my experience, and I have no inside information on this, but in my experience, just playing and watching a lot of football, you don't move somebody like that because you love them playing linebacker or you love them playing their original position. Like if I'm getting moved from like receiver to tight end, like it's not because like they love me as a receiver. You know what I'm saying? So I think that's something that it puts my antennas up in terms of like how they maybe potentially view him. And like if you've got a raw guy linebacker who needs a lot of reps to be better, like why are you taking linebacker reps away from him if you want him to play linebacker? So for me, it's Jamin. And again, like that fifth guy's got to be a dog on teams, and Jamin just hasn't done a ton of that. So it is a really interesting because it's really Jamin versus himself, but also like maybe KJ Henry, or maybe it's Dominique Hampton, or the other DB from Colorado State who's a UDFA who might make the team. Like those relationships become really interesting all of a sudden. And if we're saying who's going to play better special teams, it's probably not Jamin Davis because he hasn't done it since he's been here. So I think it's a really, really that him specifically in that room is super interesting because like I think he's in a difficult spot to make the roster, I think.
Yeah, he is my devil's advocate.
Yeah, go for it. I mean, that's just my like 1,000-foot view. Yeah,
he's 4.5 speed fast with crazy long arms, and he hits like a truck. So in the new kickoff rules, like could he be a monster on special teams? Yeah. Like, hey, Jamin, there's the ball. Go get it. Like that's the thing he's best at.
But I know who's a good. You know who I know is a monster on special teams, like Christian Holmes and Percy Butler, and you know what I'm saying. And like if you're competing,
it might wind up being the fifth or sixth safety versus Jamin, but also then like what do you like as pass rush? I mean, obviously the big determining factor is going to be can he figure out this pass rush thing. And he's got some physical traits that you would like if you looked at Jamin Davis as a draft prospect and I gave you a blind resume in terms of raw athletic score, measurements, etc. I know what you like in pass rushers. I'm talking you specifically, not generic you, but also NFL generic yous out there.
I'm with you.
We could work with this. So the question is, can he do it? I do think that the fact that we're not even talking about him as an off-ball linebacker is pretty fascinating, and definitely not good for him. But I'm also like, I don't know. I go back to thinking about how we talked about him last year, and I'm like, I don't know. It felt like he got better, and also kept like the coaches were frustrated with him for silly reasons at times, and he actually was playing pretty well. And I also think of a guy like Patrick Queen in Baltimore, all of a sudden playing next to Roquan Smith. I'm like, what would Jamin Davis be next to a Bobby Wagner?
And so that's again, I had a similar thought. We talk a lot of football, and so obviously we share similar outlooks. But wouldn't you want him to get reps doing that in practice? And he didn't get those reps. Like he was rushing the passer. Like so, it's almost like if I wanted that to happen, I'd get him out there instead of Jordan McGee. But they said we want Jordan McGee to do that. And I understand you've got a draft pick, and Jordan McGee's college film is amazing. So like I want to see that guy on the field too. But and I'm not saying like they can't change their minds, and OTAs and minicamps are really up in the air. But I just thought it was an interesting decision with a guy that, like you said, has all this upside athletically to be like, you are a guy that historically has needed a lot of reps to get something down. We're not going to give you a lot of reps at linebacker, but we're going to have you rush the passer. It just seemed like an interesting decision.
Yeah, no, for sure. I'm very, very curious to see what Jamin Davis's camp looks like. And realistically, we could be looking at 52 not on the roster come the end of camp, which feels crazy, but also is not when you take a look at the actual roster. All right, back to the Luvu and Wagner of it all. Confidence level on linebackers?
Like a 9.5. Like those guys are probably the best, some of the best, most consistent football players on the team. Like, I mean, if anybody has access to film or has access to those Carolina games, go watch Frankie Luvu and you'll just be like, holy cow. And then I think Bobby Wagner's film speaks for itself. Like his resume is outstanding. It's almost impeccable, Jordan McGee was maybe my favorite draft pick from this class. So I'm really stoked generally on the group. And Pittman, like you said, had a really good OTA minicamp period. So I'm very confident in the depth. I'm very confident in the top 2 guys. I'm just fascinated with how they're going to use them from a pass rush, role allocation standpoint. But in terms of them playing football, like, I'm very confident that they're going to do a good job as long as they stay healthy.
Yeah, which, of course, knock on wood, fingers crossed, all the things. That's the case for every single position on every team in the NFL. All right, last but not least, DBs. With all due respect to the specialists, maybe we can do a quick specialist one too, because we don't want Tress Way to be mad at us. That's the worst thing in the world. DBs. What do you look for in camp at this group? I feel like we could probably do almost a whole show on the DBs because there's so many different positions, inside corner, outside corner, all the different safety varieties in this defense.
Yeah, I think that's the thing I was just about to say. It's like, there's a lot to watch here, right? Like, it's like, how do they work? It's kind of like the offensive line. It's like, how do they work together? How do they execute tactically? How athletic are they? And then what's their ball production like? I think that all kind of goes in with this group. And then again, like with the linebackers in this defense specifically, like, what is the usage? Like, is Jeremy Chin the post safety in this defense, but he's the dime in this defense, or he's the rotational middle linebacker in this defense? So I think usage is a huge one, just in terms of like roles and identifying the nickel, the dime, the strong safety, the free safety, the corner situation when certain configurations are on the field. But it's the the technical element, like how do we play our coverages, where are our eyes, how are we reading certain concepts, and then how are we all working together and how are we communicating? I think is another thing that comes out really big for this defensive back group.
Yeah, no, that all makes sense. I'll ask you, well, actually, as we get into the position battle part of it, I'll ask you the same question I asked you about linebacker. Who's the 100% snap guy? Who's the guy that never leaves the field despite all, especially at the safety position? Because whoever wins the outside corner jobs, theoretically, they're going to be on the field all the time. Although we will talk about that because that's part of the position battle. But when we talk about the safeties, and this comes in with the communication and stuff you just ended on. Who's the 100% snap guy that's always going to be out there no matter what?
It's so funny because I was looking at this last night and getting ready for this show, and it's like, you got Derek Forrest, who was great, but he's coming off the injury. You got Percy Butler with his tremendous athletic upside, and you got, all these, Jeremy Reeves, a guy that I think is really interesting at safety. But the guy that I just could not get past, and maybe it's my bias because of how well he played the last year, is Quan Martin. I think he fits so many different buckets in this defense. He's fast, he's physical, he's smart. He's just a different cut of athlete than some of those other guys, and he also brings the intelligence and physicality that they do. So to me, he's like, he can play the post, he can play in the box, he can play nickel, he can play dime, and so I just feel like that guy's going to be on the field a lot for you. And I think one of the things that surprised the staff coming out of OTAs was like how well he did near the line of scrimmage. And that's something we got to see, live and in living color for the second half of the year. But man, to me, like the athleticism, the physicality, that whole package, it just seems, I can't think of another person on the roster like him. We talk about Percy's athleticism, but there's a mental inconsistency to the safety position, right? Derek Forrest, excellent, in terms of mentality and physicality, but not the athlete that Quan is. So I just think and then Jeremy Chin, I think, is a special football player, but special in what he does near the line of scrimmage. I don't know if you want him playing post all the time. So I think that the fact that Quan embodies all these different traits, to me, means he's the guy that I think is going to be on the field quite a bit.
Yeah, I think Quan, Chin, and Defoe are the three guys that I would consider here.
Sure.
For the 100
I'm in the
snap
same boat as you.
Like who in a base defense, who are your starting safeties? It's Quan and somebody, maybe Chin.
Yeah.
And if it's Chin, then I could see both of them on the field all the time. And then occasionally you bring Defoe in to kind of play back, but also he can play up, and he has been playing some around the line of scrimmage more. I talked to him about that actually in the spring. He's like, yeah, it's pretty cool. And Bobby Wagner's right next to me telling me what to do. So it's, they've got so much talent and so much versatility with a couple of these guys, but I just think Quan is the one who does all that stuff the best. Of those three, who's the best in the post, who's the best in the box, who's the best. And Quan is, maybe Chin's better in the box, but Quan's second. And, maybe Defoe's better in the post, but Quan's second. And so as they rotate all of the pieces around, and the Hamptons and the Reeves and whoever else comes in and out of these different sub packages, I think Quan's going to be on the field basically all of the time.
That's kind of where I'm at too. And again, it's there's a reason he was a second round pick and heck of a football player last 6 games last year. So,
all right. So then the other big position battle to me is who starts at outside corner. You got 3 names to watch: Michael Davis, Benjamin St-Juste, and Emmanuel Forbes. I have no idea how this is going to play out. Honestly, I have no freaking idea because Benjamin St-Juste and Emmanuel Forbes are like a half of the perfect Dan Quinn football player. One has ball skills, one has all the physical attributes, and the other, like Emmanuel Forbes, has none of the physical attributes outside of length. And then BSJ has none of the ball skills based off of his history and production. So I think it's really tough. And then Davis didn't play really well last year for the Chargers. But I also, Logan, I've been kicking this idea around. Now I finally get to run it by you. I think cornerback is the most coaching dependent position in the sport. Maybe quarterback would have a say there, but I still think like Peyton Manning's going to be awesome no matter where Peyton Manning went. And the example I've been using is Nnamdi Asomugha. Nnamdi Asomugha in Oakland was the best corner like in the history of the league for a certain stretch. Like he gave up nothing. Yeah. And then he went to Philadelphia and he was out of the league in a couple of years. He just completely fell off the face of the earth. And we've seen this with Josh Norman. We've seen this, on varying levels from like best corner in the league to like fine or even below average. From the Josh Normans, James Bradbury, they changed scheme last year in Philly. He was incredible 2 years ago. Last year's a bit of a struggle. And it's always multifactorial, age, injury, blah, 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 blah. But I just don't feel like we see the variance that we see with individuals at other positions like we do at corner. And so a guy like Davis, who's custom built for a Dan Quinn defense physically, could come here and be awesome. It makes it so hard to predict what's going to happen here.
No, I'm 100% the same. It's one of the reasons it's the hardest position to draft evaluate too, because you're kind of trying to project to different schemes. There's a reason that there's been all these cornerback busts in the first round, just because it's so hard to kind of say, how do they go from this scheme to this scheme? Do they fit exactly what we want? So I think that's a great point. And I think, honestly, whoever ends up starting is going to have a better year this year than they had last year. I just think the system is going to help them out. I think Joe Wood Jr. is going to help them out. I think the rush plan is going to help them out. I think the complexity and the disguises they bring is going to help them out. I think the clarity of rules, even so far, is significantly improved than it was last year. So I think they're all going to play better. In terms of who's going to win the battle, right now, it feels like St-Juste kind of has the head up on everybody in terms of being able to play. I think he was playing the right cornerback spot. And I thought Forbes did enough good stuff during OTAs to say that maybe he's in this to try and win a spot. And again, that's not to take anything away from Davis, but I just think the ball production, the athleticism that Forbes brings. And I also appreciated the physicality that he played with, specifically in the press. Now, one thing we got to call attention to is with both these guys, they're not the most willing tacklers. Like St-Juste will do it, but he's not great at it. Forbes at times turns some stuff down that, was not great. Joe Wood Jr. has made it very clear. If you're going to play in this defense at defensive back, you have to tackle, right? And so Davis is a good tackler. The other guy that they got in from Dallas last year, what's his name? Noah Igbenogany.
Yeah.
Also big physical tackler. There's some, and then, Chino Anusium, the guy from Colorado State, also big physical tackling kind of corners. So does one of those guys, as we get the pads on, as we get more physical, make waves? Because I think when you look at the coverage ability of St-Juste, the coverage ability of Forbes, I think they're going to separate themselves as better coverage players. But as we know, cornerback is not only playing coverage. It's more complicated than that. So I think that's something that I would say, as camp goes on, fans, we need to be hyper aware of is what is the physicality and what are they asking them to do from a run fit standpoint, and can they do it? Because I think physically they can do it. It's just, do they want to do it?
Yeah. No, I think that's all correct. At the bottom of the roster, I think you're looking at a lot of special team stuff. I think you're looking, obviously the coverage stuff. So I think preseason is super duper important for all these guys. And we'll obviously be talking about this position a lot as we go. So we're not going to spend too much extra time on it right now. Ultimately, Logan, confidence level that this is all going to work out for 2024 is what? I'm
very confident. And it's not necessarily because of the group. It's because of coaching. I think they've just got better coaches. And so I'm going to say an 8. I just think they're going to maximize this group. And I know you probably don't feel that way, but like
I'm not far off. I really struggle. Sorry to cut you off. I am not confident in the personnel on the outside specifically. And we should also say Mike Sandersstill's name should be mentioned.
Yeah.
I feel he's going to be awesome at nickel. Like he's your true nickel. There's not really a lot to talk about there other than like, hey, really psyched that Mikey's here. But outside, like on the outside, I am it's not even not confident. I just have so many questions about the personnel, but I'm so confident about the coaching. I don't know what the number, like 7 is kind of what I was going to say, but it's, I don't know if that's even reflective of how I feel.
We did an interview with Joe Witt, or I got to see the interview that Fletch and Smoot and Tana did with Joe Witt. And I was like, this dude is going to get these guys right. And it's him. I'm confident in him. And I think there's enough athletic ability in the group that he can maximize it, and I maybe that's misguided, but it's, it's like when you're hiring someone for a job and you're not hiring the position, you're hiring the person, you're hiring the individual. And like, I just was like, this is the guy right here. Like, this is the guy that's going to maximize this defensive back group. And so then they got, Willie Gay and Tommy Donatel. They've done a great job in OTAs. I just trust the scaffolding here for these guys. And they're going to have more clear rules. They're going to allow them to play faster, get their hands on footballs more. The rush is going to be better. I think they're just going to be a better group.
All right. Last but not least, we can do this in 90 seconds or less. Specialists.
I don't even
what
know
do we look for in this group? Do the snaps get to the holder?
Yes.
Does the holder hold them? What
Correct.
number is Tress Way going to wear?
That's a big one. Yeah.
And then do the kicks go through the uprights? Position battle to watch is actually kicker. So right now, Ramiz Ahmed is the kicker on the roster. We'll see if they bring in anyone else. I'd also say watch for, any dueling kickers in other camps and if someone gets cut.
Right.
So
yes.
that's the position battle to watch. Confidence level. How do we feel about Tyler Ott?
Very confident in Tress Way. Very confident in him. Kicker did not look great during the spring, but again, like you said, there's going to be a lot of kickers available here soon. So I'm going to say like a 6, 5, something like that. And again, like Tress Way, very high confident. Yeah, TBD. Let's say TBD. Let's say that.
TBD on this because we think the positions. TBD. Okay, we did it. That was actually like probably 40 seconds, not even 90. All due respect to the specialists, salute to you. All right, that is our show for today. It's time for training camp. Logan and I will be back with another pod recapping the first 2 practices on Thursday. If you want a recap of practice number 1, the Hoffman Show is daily 4 to 7 on the team 980. We'll have full coverage there. I'll be out there. Logan and I, I'm sure, will be watching much of practice together. So don't miss our pick 6 at 6. Or if you can't be listening right at 6 o'clock, check out the Hoffman Show podcast wherever you get yours. Logan and I will be here twice a week. And when I'm in Paris for the Olympics, taking some time off, Logan will still be here with someone else talking about football. So make sure you're subscribed to Take Command for the best training camp coverage of the Commanders from the smartest, beardedest man in all of the Commanders land and whoever's sitting in this chair. All right, that's it. That's all. We'll see you next time on Take Command. Thanks for watching this clip of Take Command, which has a brand new home.
That's right. You can watch on YouTube at the Team 980.
You can also listen to full episodes in the free Odyssey app, which is now enabled with Apple CarPlay. So we'll just, follow you around.